Yes, hello, welcome everybody. It's Chris here from the Ministry of Dice, back again today with another one of my video presentation thingamadoodads. And in today's video, we are celebrating direct damage in Dice Masters. But not just direct damage, specifically direct damage that targets the player. We're going to talk about killing my opponent with 1,000 cuts. We're going to talk about laser beams, lightning bolts, fireballs, ways of bringing your opponent's life total down to 0 without ever going near the attack step and triggering direct damage effects that are going to take your opponent out, show them the door and win you the game. That's right, there's nothing more satisfying to me. So I've had a look back through the history of my time with the game Dice Masters, picked out a few highlights, a few headlines, some popular ones that really enjoyed playing back in the day and many others really enjoyed playing back in the day. A little bit of a look at what's going on right now with direct damage and a little look forward at some cards that exist in the mythical Dark Phoenix Saga set that may or may not ever arrive. But there we go. I'm carrying on as if it is going to arrive and, you know, being an optimist. So let's get into it. Let's talk about direct damage. Let's talk about defeating opponents using direct damage that targets players. And I'm going to begin with a classic from back in the day, the OG, the one where it began for us all, Human Torch, Johnny Storm. 4-cost bolt, and he reads, while Human Torch is active, each time you field a character, Human Torch deals 1 damage to your opponent and 1 to a target character. Now, this guy was great. First things first, it's all a gift. It's in my control. I field the characters, I trigger the damage. He also has the added value of firing an extra bit of damage at a character as well, although you have to be careful with this because he always triggers, so you may end up targeting your own characters. One popular combo piece with this guy back in the day was Hulk Green Goliath. So you'd field a sidekick, ping a point of damage across the field at your opponent, and then deal the character damage to your own Hulk, triggering that large area of effect board clear that the Hulk has when he receives damage. So it's all in your control. It triggers off fielding a character, and it doesn't seem like much, deal 1 damage to your opponent, but it soon adds up, and he was a great way of softening the ground, getting your opponent's life total down a little bit, ready for a final push. You know, you weren't going for a full 20.1 turn kill. You could just reduce that life total so it was a bit easier to make the finishing blow. And interestingly enough, this guy, his game text is getting a reprint. In Dark Phoenix Saga, we're going to see Jubilee, X-Men field leader, with the same game text, almost the same stats, certainly the same cost and fielding cost. She's an X-Men character now this time round, which is interesting. One to have a look at with your Hope, Pluripotent, Echopraxia. But the opportunity to trigger damage when fielding characters using this game text is going to come back round into Modern and is going to be available for newer players to give a try. So, Human Torch, Johnny Storm, Jubilee, X-Men field leader, great examples of that little pingity ping 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 1,000 cuts way of defeating your opponent. Although these guys aren't the only example of damage that triggers when you field a character. One card right now that is super popular is Thor, Jormungan's Fear. He's very expensive at a 6 cost, but he does more damage for that extra kind of investment. While Thor is active, when you field a character die, deal 2 damage to target character die or player. So he's got that flexibility where he can deliver the damage. It's a little bit more painful. He's got bigger stats, so he's harder for the opponent to remove. He's got the added value of a global that lets you pick up actions and basic actions for cheaper. And he just stands staunch, firing damage down the field. And he exists now in a time, and this applies to Jubilee as well, he exists now in a time where there's globals, like the Collector Global, for example, that allows you to create characters that you can field. Or there's other new characters like token makers coming up. The Poison Ivy and the Kryptonite Crisis springs to mind specifically, where you're fielding characters to deal damage. So Johnny Storm, we used to have to get characters out, KO them, refield them, KO them, refield them, or buy lots of cheap characters. Now, these damage-dealing characters that trigger off the fielding of a die have the backup, the support of globals like the Collector Global, of the Atlantis Global, and of game effects from token makers and the like. So another great example of killing your opponent with 1,000 cuts, although, again, this guy snowballs. It gets out of hand real quick. I like tinkering around with this guy with Instant War, you know, the basic action that lets you field sidekicks from your bag. I like playing around with this guy. Big 6-point hit out, just boom, out the gate. So there you go. A couple of examples of direct damage characters that trigger from fielding character dice. Right then, next up we have my all-time favourite. This card I'm about to show you now is the card that I played around with an enormous amount, and I've used him to win WKOs, or certainly highly ranking WKOs. I used him in Global Escalation recently to do well at the Euros in 2019. It is, of course, the Avengers vs X-Men classic, Colossus, Pyotr, Rasputin. This guy's not 1,000 cut kill. This guy can do your opponent in 2 turns flat. And if you play it right, you can just completely lock him out and let Colossus do his thing. He reads, while Colossus is active at the end of your turn, each of your characters of level 2 or higher deal 2 damage to your opponent. And what I used to love doing with this guy is just loading up my team with loads of really cool control effects, like Madam Mask to prevent when fielded, or John Constantine Hellblazer to mess with when fielded effects, Lyssa Drax, oracles, whatever, just loads of control stuff to really interfere with my opponent's best laid plans, and then ramp up to the 7, drop a Colossus in the field, and then sit back and let my 5 character dice deal 10 damage at the end of my turn, then just control my opponent through their turn, and in the following go, do another 10. So super powerful, very expensive card, but in Global Escalation recently, I had a lot of success using him with Hope, Pluripotent Echopraxia, who copies X-Men characters. And guess what? His game text is getting a reprint too in the upcoming Dark Phoenix Saga set for a little bit cheaper. He's a 6 cost this time round and just subtitled Pyotr, but exactly the same game text. While Colossus is active at the end of your turn, each of your level 2 or 3 character dice deals your opponent 2 damage. So nice combo pieces with Colossus. Your Zatanna that lets you spin up characters when you field them. Power Almighties to spin up characters. Energy Field Globals. All these types of things that let you get your dice at a higher level in order to drop a Colossus Pyotr out in the field and deal 2 damage per dice at the end of your turn. Copy him with a Hope Pluripotent Echopraxia, and you're dealing 4. What a legend. Love this guy. Really suited my very tentative kind of control play style because it didn't require me. I could just buy and field dice and then drop him in the field to do the business. I would highly recommend, if you're playing Golden, giving Colossus Pyotr Rasputin a try and keeping an eye on that Colossus Pyotr in the future. He's going to go somewhere. I absolutely think he's going to go somewhere. Or I certainly want him to. Okay, so that's another example of a kind of while active, just chilling in the field, direct damage character. Let's talk a little bit about characters that deal damage when they're fielded. And again, we're going to look at a classic here, Green Goblin Gobby. 3 cost bolt, and when he's fielded, Green Goblin deals 1 damage to your opponent for each sidekick in the field. So a really powerful piece, super effective back in the day. Look at those lovely low fielding costs as well, but that nice attack value at the level 3. Little story, random Chris tangent. I was playing a good friend of mine, Paul, back in the day, and he just miraculously, in his first turn, bought a Green Goblin for 3. Then in his second turn, he rolled 4 sidekicks just right out of the gate, fielded them. In his third turn, he rolled Green Goblin on level 3, fielded him, dealt me 4 damage, and then attacked with the Green Goblin, did another 5. By the third turn, I was on 11 life. Couldn't believe it. I'll never forget that, Paul, you bugger. But Green Goblin Gobby, I mean, certainly through time, as we've had more kind of sidekick generating globals and sidekick generating cards, he has become increasingly more powerful. Definitely one to play around with in a golden context or a global escalation context. But Green Goblin Gobby, yeah, one of the old classic kind of when fielded direct damage. And the Green Goblin character has traditionally remained a when fielded damage dealer. Here's another super popular one from back in the day, Norman Osborne, Don't Call Me Gobby. When fielded, Norman Osborne deals 1 damage to your opponent for each villain character die in the field zone. He was super popular with cards like the Collector, Tanlier Tivan, which let you field characters at a discount in your main step. He was also popular with things like Malekith that turns sidekicks into villains or villain-making globals. So really powerful card, one I used a great deal and I know was very popular in that kind of period of modern when he was legal. So there's some great examples of some when-fielded direct damage stuff going on. Again, not really 1,000 cuts either. You know, Norman Osborne played well because it applied the damage on your opponent's turn and your turn. With the Collector, you could be doing sort of 5 damage in your go, 5 damage in their go, 5 damage in your go, 5, you could have them done in 2 turns. So not so much the kind of Human Torch down to 19, down to 18, down to 17, down to 16, but just a nice big hefty punch. Also, Norman Osborne, Don't Call Me Gobby, was particularly notable because it was each villain in the field, yours and your opponent's. So he used to play really well with the Danger Room dice from X-Men, X-Men First Class, I want to say, that turned all character dice into villains. So you'd play your Danger Room, then field a Norman Osborne with your Collector for one fist, and then do an epic amount of damage. So really great when fielded examples. But these aren't the only guys who are examples of when fielded direct damage. Here's another one that people have played around with in the past. Firefly, Ted Carson. When fielded, deal 1 damage to your opponent for each bolt character die you control. So just like really focusing down on the energy. Really popular in things like single energy tournaments or just particularly bolt-centric kind of strategies. So this was a great one, although obviously not the same kind of damage capacity as your Norman Osborne. You also have Boom Boom, the super rare, from X-Men First Class. When fielded, deal 1 damage to your opponent for each of your active characters. And not the lump sum that you could get out of a Norman Osborne Danger Room combo, but still pretty good. The main thing here that just really slowed these guys down, particularly Firefly and Boom Boom, was those high fielding costs on level 3. If you were going for some quick, cheap, early damage with these guys, you could find it a bit of a pressure on your spending power to deal with the 2 fielding cost. Firefly as well, because he has 3 and 4 defense on his level 2 and level 3, was sometimes a bit tricky to remove. But you've got loads of great globals that allow you to kind of KO these guys and refield them, KO and refield them. Blue Eyes White Dragon from the Yu-Gi-Oh set back in the day with that's KO Global, Nihilor, and of course Dark Phoenix in the new Dark Phoenix Saga set is a KO Global as well. So it was always a popular move to kind of field them, KO them, refield them, KO them, refield them, KO them, which is something you might want to look at if you're playing in Golden. Speaking of Boom Boom, just kind of going back to a while active effect, here's one of my other all-time faves. Played with this one a great deal. Boom Boom Time Bomb. 2 cost bolt. She reads, while Boom Boom is active, when you use a basic action die, it deals 2 damage to target opponent or character die. So she was really fun to play around with, one that you could get a lot of mileage out of with cheap basic actions. Specifically, you'd see people using her with Ping and Throne Brick, of course, just for the added ramp value, of course. So yeah, just pinging stuff with Throne Brick and then removing characters or dealing direct damage to your opponent. A little bit more of a slow burner here, but just an interesting direct damage one that people used to play around with a great deal. She was slowed down a lot by Scarlet Witch. Careful what you wish for, the one that made actions re-roll. So you'd often see things like Acerax on the team with the basic action re-roll global, but a fun one nonetheless. One of the other risks with Boom Boom is that it's only basic action dice, not basic action and action dice. So people used to see what was going on and buy your Throne Bricks out from under you. So if you see a Boom Boom Time Bomb across the table with a Throne Brick in the middle, pick up the Throne Bricks. That's my best recommendation. Yeah, there you go. So Boom Boom Time Bomb, another super popular one that you were able to sit back and defeat your opponent, bring them down to 0 life by just kind of getting on with your own stuff and winding them up. Now then, it would be absolutely remiss of me to do a direct damage celebration, a video about direct damage, without looking at this next combo. We've got the Yuanti Epic Humanoid. A 2-cost bolt. She has a tune, but also, while Yuanti Pureblood is active, when you purchase an action die, trigger the attune ability of all active character dice. So not only did she fire damage across the table to a player or to a character die when you used an action, but she did it when you bought an action. Now this was super powerful because there is very little in the game that you can do to stop your opponent from buying dice. Very little. Very, very little. It was wildly frustrating. And so players used to put Yuanti Pureblood Epic Humanoid on a team, load up on really cheap one-cost actions like Bat Signal, for example, with no real intention of using the Bat Signal for anything other than a cheap die to purchase, and then amp up the damage that is being delivered with this evil piece of work. Cosmic Cube, Energy of the Beyonders. Whenever an action die or character ability deals damage this turn, increase that damage by 2. So get yourself a Yuanti Pureblood out, buy a Cosmic Cube, play the Cosmic Cube, which would deal 3 damage out the gate in its own right, and then just generate as much energy as you can to buy cheap 1 or 2 cost actions and just trigger a tune like a maniac. It used to snowball like crazy. And again, this combo was so powerful, it eventually got itself banned. It still had teeth, though, because once the Cosmic Cube was out the picture, folks started using this guy, Pseudo Dragon, Paragon Familiar. While Pseudo Dragon is active, your Attune character dice deal 2 damage with the Attune ability. Now, clearly not as potent as the Cosmic Cube, but still 2 characters at a 2 cost that you could get bought and out in the field super, super quick, and you can control by buying dice. Buying dice! It was madness! Yeah, I'll just buy all 4 of these bat signals and deal you 8. Thanks very much. It was crazy. So, yeah, it'd be absolutely remiss of me not to celebrate direct damage without looking at the Yuanti Pureblood Cosmic Cube combo. It was a shame the Cosmic Cube got banned because obviously it has application with other direct damage strategies that it might have been quite less potent with, but equally as fun. But there you go. That's just it got abused. What can I say? It was degenerate. It absolutely was degenerate. And that Yuanti Pureblood with the Cosmic Cube combo was pretty grim, but still had teeth with Pseudo Dragon. So there you go. So yeah, there we are. There's the Yuanti Pureblood Cosmic Cube Classic. Next, let's have a look at another old school favourite. The Lantern Ring, limited only by imagination. Really interesting action dice, this. Continuous. While active, when your characters attack, they deal 1 damage to target player for each energy symbol in your reserve pool that matches their type. So this was a great one to brew around, really attracted to brew around because you could make all sorts of different teams, bolt-centric versions, a mask version of this was really popular back in the day using morphing jars and multiple man from the Deadpool set. You could make, there was a shield variant, there was fist variants using the swarmy fist characters like Goblin and Kobold, so a really great card to use. It was also really interesting from a rules perspective because the damage was being dealt by the character themselves, not by Lantern Ring, which was always very interesting. And what it did to the meta, it made loads of people put like Gnome Rangers and Mana the Breaker from Yu-Gi-Oh!, which were characters that removed continuous dice when they were fielded, kind of brought them into the meta a great deal as well. So Lantern Ring, limited only by imagination, and had a massive capacity for damage dealing when it really picked up pace. There's kind of a nerf version in the meta right now. We've got Green Lantern Human. While Green Lantern is active, your Justice League character dice gain when this character die attacks deal 1 damage to target player for each energy symbol in your reserve pool that matches this character die's energy type. So it's Justice League focused. It seems to have developed in the meta around mask characters, with the Green Lantern being a mask character himself, supported by things like Plastic Man and Zatanna. And then generating lots of masks using things like Kang Swarm or Clayface Global Manipulation to build up your mask energy in the field. So certainly not as potent as Lantern Ring used to be back in the day, but some version of this game text is still in existence now, and one that I'd recommend playing around with. Let me think, what's next? I can't remember what's next. Oh, of course. How could I forget this guy? Iceman, right on schedule. He's another interesting twist, a bit like the Green Lantern that I've just shown there, because this is direct damage that kicks off in the attack step. So Iceman, right on schedule. This was the team that was used by our European champion right now, Peter van der Velde. I played it myself, actually, in the European Championship, which took me to top 8, I think, off the top of my... Yeah, top 8. Also, second place, James Bloor, was an Iceman right on schedule team. When Iceman takes damage during the attack step, he deals 2 damage to target opponent. So it's just a super popular card because he's got that big defense number, but he was cheaper to buy than an original version of him, which was Nova from the Avengers Vs X-Men set. And you would load your team up with something like Unstable Canister that had a direct damage pingy global, where you could pay a bolt to deal 1 damage to a character. Move to the attack step, attack with your Iceman right on schedule. Then using globals like the Clayface global, you'd manipulate yourself into a position with loads of bolts in your reserve pool, and then just hit him for 5, dealing 10 damage in that turn. So Iceman right on schedule, really interesting. The fact that he took place in the attack step was interesting. There was lots of people playing around with control in the meta to try and interfere with Iceman during the main step before your opponent could get to the point of attacking with him. But once he attacked, you really felt it. You know what I mean? Just really felt that cold sting from Iceman blasting you with his icy blast. So Iceman right on schedule, another great direct damage card. So they're all kind of big swingers, big hitters, but there are a couple of other interesting things that have been going on with direct damage. I'm not going to exhaustively go through every single one, but a couple of notable mentions here. I've got Infiltrate, which was an interesting one to play around with. Never really took off, but with Angela, Hunter of Demons here, who had the game text, while Angela is active, your character dice with Infiltrate cannot be blocked and deal no combat damage. And then pairing her up with characters like Ricochet, who's got Infiltrate, but also generates ramp through the use of Infiltrate keyword. Oh, I should point out what Infiltrate is in case anyone doesn't know. So Infiltrate, when the character attacks and is unblocked, they deal a point of damage. So you get a nice wide field of Infiltrate characters. Drop Angela out so that your opponent can't block your Infiltrate characters. Attack with them all, do a big old ping, and then draw them back. And then there was characters that helped you, like Black Widow, Stinger from... what set was she in? I want to say the Mighty Thor, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But she would deal 2 damage per Infiltrate, for example, increase the damage capacity. So it was just tricky because you needed a lot of characters with Infiltrate game text in your team. Didn't leave a lot of room for other useful stuff like control, removal, other utility pieces. So it didn't quite take off, but it was super fun in a casual way, and one that you definitely saw coming around in local game stores as people were messing around with it and tinkering with it and playing about. But these were the 2 kind of key pieces. Angela to keep your Infiltrate dice from getting blocked, and then Ricochet for generating ramp. There's a Captain America that gives Infiltrate sidekicks, for example, that I've seen experimented with. So Infiltrate, just another interesting, notable mention. We've also got the Awaken guys. The Atom Professor has Awakened, deal 2 damage to target opponent. Now, he was particularly popular at a point when Energy Field Global, which where you pay a mask to spin a character up and spin a character down, wasn't specifying that it had to be 2 different characters. So he was popular at that point because the rules lawyers had kind of figured out that you can spin down Atom and then spin him back up using the same global effect. It was later errated so that it was more reflective of other previous spin up, spin down globals that had been used in earlier sets, which kind of nerfed him a little bit and made it much more challenging to do the damage. But again, a fun one to play around with in a casual setting. He was definitely an interesting character, and we've had a kind of reprint of the Atom's game text with Nebulous, Space Pirate. She's got Awaken, deal 1 damage to target character die and 2 damage to target player. So she's a little bit more expensive at a 5 cost, but has that added value of dealing a ping damage to a character. Also, the fact that she's a mass character meant that you could get her out in the field a bit quicker. I've seen her used with Asuka from WWE that discounts mass characters by 2, which was just a little bit more advantageous than the Atom because, you were loading your team up with things like Aquaman to make your Atom a bit cheaper, and by the time you were buying Aquaman, and it was just taking too long. So Nebula Space Pirate is also in modern right now, as is the Atom. I've also seen people try and play with both. Get one of each out in the field and then awaken them up and down, or just buy loads of Nebulas and as you awaken. As you energy field one down, you energy field another up, and then just manipulate it. Bit slower, a bit more faffing around, more expensive win condition than some of the exciting kind of 2 costs that I've shown today, but definitely one to have a little tinker with. Right, I'm at the end now, but I'm going to finish with my 3rd of the top 3. If you've been keeping track, Colossus, Pyotr, Rasputin, Boom Boom, Time Bomb, and of course, how could I not mention Retaliation, and specifically this guy, Black Manta, Deep Sea Deviant. A 3-cost villainous fist with Retaliation. If one of your villains is KO'd, deal 1 damage to your opponent for each of your active villains. Love, love, love this guy. Used to make team after team after team using Black Manta, a load of really exciting fun villains to play around with, and the Blue Eyes White Dragon, so I could use the global to KO villains. I had a great team that did really well with this guy, actually, that was paired up with Malekith that made sidekicks villains, and then the Professor X Global that made sidekicks, and the Green Goblin, the rare Green Goblin that had the sidekick killing global on him. A lot of characters to get out in the field to make it happen, but super, super fun. And this, again, another one that on the surface you're like, I'll be doing 1 or 2 damage here or there. But it snowballed. It snowballed so bad because there's loads of great villains that you can just dump in the field, have them sitting there chilling, causing havoc for your opponent with control game texts or weird defensive game texts. I mean, go and have a look. There's loads of them. But the minute they attacked, they'd end up KOing one of your villains, so you'd end up doing the retaliation damage. But then in your go, you just use Blue Eyes White Dragon Global to KO one of your own villains and do loads of damage. And if you can get sort of 5 villains out in the field, you know, you're pinging across for 4, 5 a turn, and it soon adds up. I used to love playing around this guy. There's a great classic Legion of Doom cartoon variant promo out there that I just used to love playing as well because it looked a bit different and had a lot of flavour and character to it. So I'm finishing, big finish there on one of my all-time faves, Black Manta Deep Sea Deviant. If you're building a golden collection right now, go and give this guy a try. It will make your opponents flip the table. So there we are then, folks. I mean, I'll reiterate, not an exhaustive list of all the direct damage strategies in the game. There's a ton more, loads that I haven't talked about, like, you know, Starfire from Teen Titans and blah, 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 blah. But those are some of my faves. Those are some of the ones I had some real joy and pleasure out of. A lot of mileage in brewing and building teams and tinkering and playing around and trying different variants of. And I'd recommend that you give it a go too. Certainly down your local game store if you're playing around with casual formats. Although some of those, word of warning, some of those can be really degenerate and upset your opponents, so just be mindful of that if you are playing it in a casual setting. But please do let me know in the comments down below, what are your favourite direct damage strategies? Let's get into a bit of conversation. What have I missed? Which of those do you hate the most? Which of those do you love the most? What kind of variants of these cards have you played around with in weird and wonderful team constructions? I'd love to hear from you. Let me know. And of course, give this video a like if you liked it. Give it a dislike if you didn't like it. But if you give me a dislike, please give me some useful feedback, some constructive feedback in the comments. And if you're not already subscribed, subscribe to the channel. But I'll wrap it up there. Thanks for watching, folks. I've been Chris, and I'll see you on a podcast over at BritRoller6.com or here again at YouTube on a video sometime soon. Ta-ra!